DW Africa Link.
The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has approved the withdrawal of junta-led countries Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso from the bloc from the 29th of January 2025. But here's what's interesting. ECOWAS gave the three countries up till July next year to reconsider their move. So what does that all mean for all parties involved? And is there a scenario where the now so-called Alliance of Sahel States will rejoin the West African Regional Bloc? That's what's coming up. I am Eddie Micah Jr., and you are welcome to Africa Link, the podcast connecting you to the stories that matter.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
West African leaders have given three countries led by military governments 6 months to reconsider their decision to quit the regional group ECOWAS. The decision on Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger came after all three countries said their decision to quit the Economic Community of West African States was irreversible. They condemned the bloc as subservient to ex-colonial ruler France. For more on this, let's bring in Bram Postumus. He is DW's West Africa correspondent. Welcome to the program, Bram. So, as things stand, from the 29th of January next year, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso will no longer be a part of the regional bloc ECOWAS. How big a deal is it that ECOWAS approved this?
In and of itself is not such a big deal because it's in the rules. If you go back to the 1975 treaty that actually established ECOWAS, it's called the Lagos Treaty. There is an article in there that says, should any of the members want to retire from this organization, you have to bring into account the rule of 1 year notice. You have to give 1 year's notice. And then basically you're free to go. And obviously there are all kinds of rules and protocols surrounding all that sort of thing. But it's in the rules, it's in the regulations. So the ones who founded ECOWAS already were reckoning with the possibility that at some point one or more members might want to leave. And actually there's precedent for this. Mauritania left, I think it was in 2000. So it's not entirely unique. Now, how big a deal it is in other respects is a whole different discussion, obviously. You know, we get to talk about, well, first and foremost, of course, security, but also traffic, trade, movement of people, and all those practical things. But in and of itself, it's one of those things that may happen, and it was already accounted for, and it was already counted on in the rules.
Right. What's interesting is that ECOWAS gave the three countries up to July next year to reconsider their planned withdrawal from the regional bloc. So what message is ECOWAS trying to send here?
Oh, the message is quite clear. The message ECOWAS is sending out is the door's still open, at least for another 6 months. And if you want to reconsider your decision, you're welcome back in. And the two designated mediators, President Diomaye Faye of Senegal and Faure Gnassingbé of Togo, are still engaged in this mediation. To be perfectly honest with you, nothing much will come of it as long as these three juntas are in place. The agenda is very clear. They had made it clear that they wanted to leave the organization. A 6-month grace period, which was decided on the spot in Abuja on Sunday, almost a week ago. That's not going to make any difference. It's just a gesture that ECOWAS is making, and obviously also intended to make them look good, because mind you, when the coup in Niger happened in 2023, the same ECOWAS was quite prepared to intervene militarily to reverse the situation. So it's a bit of a climb down as far as ECOWAS is concerned. They also want to look conciliatory, and it's also practical, you know. These are neighbors. These three countries, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, are neighbors. The fact that they are leaving ECOWAS does not mean that they stop being neighbors. They're still neighbors, and so one way or another, you will have relations with them.
But for those listening and wondering, it looks like these three countries have some sort of issues with ECOWAS. They've talked about it before. Can you enlighten us. What is their grievances, or what are their grievances with ECOWAS?
I think the main grievance was the fact that they objected to the fact that ECOWAS imposed sanctions after all the coups had happened, economic sanctions. They were really trying to strangle these three countries. And these are all landlocked countries with small economies. So it is not a particularly complicated thing to cut them off. And ECOWAS was thinking, when the first coup happened in 2020 in Mali and throughout the whole region, when these coups cascaded on, that they could bring them back by cutting them off economically and, make the junta say, oh, yes, we made a terrible mistake. Let's not do this again. That quite clearly hasn't happened. So instead, what has happened is that the three countries have banded together and said, okay, we now set up an alliance of our own. We call it the Confederation of Sahel States, as it's now known. And we might bring in even other Sahel countries, particularly Chad, that might be a candidate. But we don't want to have anything to do with you because you've been extremely nasty to us. And they have a point when it comes to that. The counterpoint by ECOWAS is, of course, you have grabbed power through the barrel of a gun, which is not allowed. We don't do this. We shouldn't be doing this. This is 2024, not the 70s or the 60s. And therefore, you will be sanctioned because this kind of stuff is no longer supposed to be happening. So those are two positions which are pretty much carved in stone and have proved to be immovable. And of course, the final point you can add to this is that ECOWAS is not entirely honest about this. There have been attempts to change the constitution and maintain presidents in power, particularly here in Côte d'Ivoire. We also had it in Guinea, where ex-president Alpha Condé was tampering with the constitution so he could stay in power. The same is happening in Togo. One of the mediators, mind you, has changed the constitution so he can remain in power. So the reproach being made against ECOWAS is a valid one in that, okay, so basically you say non-constitutional regime change is fine as long as it isn't done by the military. That is obviously a dishonest position to take, rely on. And what this also means, to end with, is if this happens, obviously the confederation will be a thing of the past, and that means that the return of one, two, or even all three of these countries back into ECOWAS becomes another possibility.
Okay. I wish we had a crystal ball to see into the future to know how things will pan out. We don't, so we would have to keep tabs on the situation and see how things go. But hey, as always, Bram Postumus, DW's West Africa correspondent, it's always a pleasure talking to you as you break things down. I'm sure our listeners have learned a lot. I know I have. Thank you very much, Bram, for your time.
You're very welcome, and thanks for having me again.
Africa is changing. Don't get left behind. Tune in to Africa Link.
The three breakaway states have already formed their own confederation. That's the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. They even recently held their own ministerial level meeting in Niger's capital, Niamey. All three states have gone through military coups in recent years, and all are battling jihadist insurgencies. But that's not the only concern. Ibrahima Khan from Senegal is a political analyst focused on regional institutions in Africa. Hello and welcome, sir. I first want to find out from you, what impact could the departure of the three Sahel states have on free trade and movement? Because that's been a general concern for many.
Well, it has an impact, but so far at the beginning, it will have a limited impact. I explained that limited impact by the fact that the three countries that are leaving are also members of another sub-regional mechanism that is called UEMOA, which has the same legal framework about free movement of person within the Francophone countries. So meaning that as long as the citizens are traveling in Francophone countries, they will not face any difficulties. But it's only when they travel within Anglophone countries or Lusophone countries, because we have two Lusophone countries in West Africa. That's where the problem will be tricky. And that's why ECOWAS asked the two presidents to continue the conversation on the modalities of the separation, because that modalities of separation will have to take into consideration the fact that the citizen of the three countries will have to travel within other countries in the region, and it will have legal consequences.
Right. So you foresee a slight challenge, but not as major as people are concerned about. But you also talked about mediation efforts. President Faure Gnassingbé of Togo and President Faye of Senegal, they are tasked with mediating up to the end of the transition period to bring the three member countries back to ECOWAS. Some say there's still hope, but how much should we expect from their mediation?
I really think that the decision or the meeting last Sunday acted the separation. When you read the final communique of the meeting, it talks about taking note of the notification and acknowledge that in accordance with the provision of Article 91 of the ECOWAS country, the three countries will officially cease to be member. If a document says that, it means that they acted. And the document even goes further by saying that the authority reaffirm the unflinching adherence to the provision of the supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance, in particular, the zero tolerance to power obtained or maintained by unconstitutional means. You know, as long as this country will remain military regime, ECOWAS says they cannot be members of ECOWAS system. That's my reading of the document, which means that the separation is already acted.
Right. I mean, basically from January 29th, 2025, it will be, the divorce will be official.
Yes.
You are basically suggesting that the only way they can return to ECOWAS is if they are being ruled by civilians and they return to democracy, basically.
They definitely. And the 6-month period that have been in the document is the 6-month period during which the two presidents will discuss with the leaders of the three regions on the modalities of separation. There are institutions that are located in the three countries. With ECOWAS need to deal with those institutions. For example, the health center of ECOWAS is based in Bobo-Dioulasso in Burkina Faso. So far, there is a number of programs that are implemented in the three countries for an amount, of more than $500 million US. Those programs will no longer be, will be discontinued. How do we deal with them? And a point that you mentioned earlier, which is the issue of the security. These three countries are facing huge challenges on security issues. And those security issues are even affecting some of the countries, namely Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire. They need conversation about that to ensure that the collaboration will continue despite the fact that they will leave the institution.
Right. Let's hammer a bit on the security situation, because that is indeed very key. So, people expect some sort of security cooperation in the region to somehow continue. But do tell me, what impact will the divorce or separation have on that?
Well, it will have an impact on that because, in the recent month, ECOWAS was really willing to come back and support, in a very more practical way, support the country to deal with the insurgencies that they are facing the last 10 years. I have to say that ECOWAS' effort in the past were limited because the European countries that had their forces in the region namely France, Germany, the US, were opposed to the presence of Francophone or ECOWAS forces in the region. They created the G5 Sahel simply to really obstruct the possibility of ECOWAS country to come and support the neighboring, the members states. Now that the French have left, all the Western forces have left, I think these, even though the Russians are there, there is a need for conversation, discussion among, security people to really find a way of at least finding ways and means by which ECOWAS will still continue to support those the three countries, because if they don't support the three countries, they will face the consequences.
Right. It's interesting and key that you mentioned Western forces, particularly France, because seems to be the elephant in the room. The three countries, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, have in the past condemned the ECOWAS bloc as subservient to ex-colonial ruler France. What's your take on that?
Well, I think that statement is really very hard, but at the same time, we need to acknowledge the fact that there was a lack of good governance at ECOWAS level as far as the transition and the situation created by the military coup in the country are concerned. If you look at the decision that was taken against Niger, the hard decision, the hard sanction taken against Niger, for me, was an illustration of the bad governance that existed within ECOWAS at that time. Because even when you read the normative framework about sanction in ECOWAS, that normative framework was saying sanctions are gradual. And but with Niger, they decided to have the hardest sanction against the country. Even medicine couldn't be imported by Niger. That, for me, was really very, very hard from our leaders. And we've seen the consequences. People were angry against ECOWAS, were seeing ECOWAS was not really taking care of its own citizens, was just simply...
But what has that got to do with France?
No, it has to do with France because when ECOWAS made those statements, ECOWAS was supported by France. Even the French was saying, if ECOWAS want to invade Niger, we are ready to support ECOWAS logistically and other. That's why I think many people were of the view that ECOWAS was instrumentalized by the French country. I personally don't think so, but I think there were mistakes made by our leadership. And don't forget that at the time that decision was taken, there were also among the leaders who were in the room, some of them, particularly the Nigerian one, whose election was not even yet acknowledged by the judiciary in his country. So maybe they wanted to show that they are in charge. Right. You understand? And those are the circumstances that can explain that. But the impact on the population was already there. So, which means that in this process, we need also to think about the reform of ECOWAS as an institution. It will be reformed not just because three countries have left the institution and that needs to be a lot of readjustment, but ECOWAS as an entity needs to reflect on the 50 years of its existence. What went wrong, what went well, what needs to change, and how ECOWAS, the citizen of ECOWAS can be also involved in the functioning of this institution. Because I think if those elements are there, ECOWAS will not be the one that people want to leave. It will be the one that people want to be part of.
So in a sense, are you saying you don't think that ECOWAS is serving the interest of the people in its region that it should take care of?
I really think that in the case of Niger, ECOWAS should have done better. ECOWAS should have really taken into consideration the particular situation of Niger at that time and not put the type of sanction that they have put. That's one. The second one, even generally taking the situation, the transition in the three countries, ECOWAS should have done better. You decide to sanction military coup, but you don't decide to sanction countries that are really changing their own constitution to maintain the head of state indefinitely in power. That's also bad governance. And people are watching all of that. So,
especially if you look at the flip-flop, as you suggested earlier, considering that the current chair of ECOWAS, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu, insists that now he wants to use diplomacy to bring back the countries. But as you said, months ago, he was threatening the use of military force. So, the question is he the man to deliver and bring them back?
Well, the system that we have at the moment is that every year we have a new leader who will be running the institution for a year. We had him at the head of the ECOWAS. At the time, he just became president. I think that was also a mistake. The Senegalese president, Diomaye Faye, at the last session, apparently they wanted him to be the next leader. He refused. He refused by telling them, I'm not yet in place to be able to really run this institution. I'm just learning at the moment. And I think Tinubu should not have been elected at that time because he was just elected. There were many other people who could have done the job better and who would have maybe helped to take other decisions than the one that he has taken. And if you recall, Tinubu, after having taken that decision, has to call on traditional leaders of Nigeria to help him to reconnect with the new authorities of Niger. We should have avoided those kind of situations.
Right. As you say, some mistakes have been made along the way that have made it even more challenging for these three countries to return. A final point from you, a quick one on this, if you can, is, should we, or is there any room for optimism that these three Sahel-aligned countries now, that's their group now, group of three, should we be optimistic in any way that they could return to join the ECOWAS regional bloc?
Definitely, yes. And I will give you at least 3 to 4 reasons. The first reason, these three countries are landlocked countries in West Africa. They need the people who are at the coast for their import and their export. They desperately need to be in the same system with other countries so that they can benefit from, the belonging to a regional economic community. That's one. 2, they are isolated at the moment, not only within ECOWAS, but within the AU. All the AU system is built around regional economic communities. How these people can present candidates in the future at the AU or participate in the AU activity without being part of a regional economic community? That's a second question that they will have to answer. 3, I'm not quite sure that if one civilian leader comes to power in one of these countries, he will continue to have this hard line because he will understand that for the benefit of the population of their country, the fact that their country participated 50 years in the functioning of ECOWAS, if you live with somebody in 50 years, you are a parent of that person. You are not a stranger for that person. And my last point is that because the economy is not strong, the security issues will be harder and harder. Very soon, they will come back to the reality that they need the neighboring country, and they will need to come back in the family. But coming back in the family will not be in the same condition that they left. I think it will have a cost.
Only time will tell how things will develop. But very much appreciate your time and insight. Ibrahim Khan from Senegal, political analyst focused on regional institutions in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And imposed heavy sanctions after the July 2023 coup in Niger. That was the region's 6th in 3 years. ECOWAS has since softened its position, though member states are split over the best course of action to deal with the military governments. That's how we end this edition of Africa Link. Join the conversation on our Facebook page, DW Africa. Listen to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. Click